They've chosen to do is go back to an era of austerity, of punching and pounding down on the poorest in society.
You've got to cut welfare for people who shouldn't be claiming welfare because they've decided to sit at home on their backside as opposed to getting up and going out to work, which is what most of us do.
There's no plan by reform. It's just, if you're angry, vote for us. In England, surely Labour should be as concerned as I am about the growth of that kind of politics, and a statement like this today doesn't help, does it?
Can I ask you what you made of what you just heard in the chamber?
Yeah, of course, the Chancellor was making it clear to all of us that the world has changed, but in my eyes and the eyes of so many people watching, the only thing that's changed is the Labour Party. They had some big choices to make today, and what they've chosen to do is go back to an era of austerity, of punching and pounding down on the poorest in society, disabled people who need support and lifted up in life. And that's not what the Labour Party was elected to do. That's not the change that they offered. And ultimately the picture is gloomy. The picture is bleak. We know that growth is down. We know that inflation is going up. Those underlying fundamentals of the UK economy just aren't working. And I just wonder when Westminster's going to wake up and realise that Brexit was a bad thing, that in order to have a good economy you have to work with your closest neighbours in the European Union, that climate change matters and you need to invest in net zero. All of these big topics, these big discussions just don't happen in there right now. It's a race to the bottom, and it's the sort of thing that George Osborne will be really happy about.
You mentioned there the vulnerable and how this budget affects them, and you gave quite a moving question in PMQs. How are these Labour's welfare cuts personal to you?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something I speak about a huge amount, but I was disabled for 18 years. I worked on crutches. I had a rare hip condition thanks to the NHS. I've got a new hip, which means I can run around all fine and well now. But for a long time it was tough. It was really tough. So I understand it when folk contact me and they say, I'm scared about this. I'm worried about the impact this is going to have because my disability impacts my ability to work. And the scary stat that I referred to is that 55% of children living in poverty in Scotland have a disabled member in their family in that household. So effectively the government is, rather than helping these kids get out of poverty, is going to take money away from their mums and their dads. That's not going to help anyone. That's not going to change people's lives. That's not what the Labour Party stands for. And you don't really have to ask me to try and back that up. All you've got to do is watch the faces of the Labour politicians sitting in that chamber today, because they are gloomy, they are downbeat, they're upset, because they all thought they were going to come in and change society. Well, they are going to change society, but it's going to be for the worst.
Why do you think that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer have chosen to cut welfare for some of the most vulnerable and poorest in society instead of implementing something like a wealth tax?
Because they see it as the easiest thing to do. It's always easier to beat down on people than it is to try and challenge the norms. You're in that chamber and nobody's talking about leaving the European Union. Nobody's talking about the tens of billions of pounds impact that's had upon the economy. Nobody's talking about the fact that the Chancellor has proactively boxed herself in on fiscal rules and taxation policies, which didn't need to. Nobody's told her to do that. She's done that of her own accord. So all of the decisions that she's taking now as a supposed Labour Chancellor and the consequences of that is something that they have to own. Each and every Labour politician who backs that, who votes for it, has to own it. And that's going to be their legacy. And it's not going to be any different to the David Cameron, George Osborne years. And I think the public are waking up to that. Unfortunately, a lot of the public who are waking up to that see the only alternative is reform. We're lucky in Scotland because we've got ourselves who are doing pretty well and will continue to do well because we understand the intrinsic link between improving people's lives and making sure that they stick with you when it comes to the ballot box. That's where our focus is. But Westminster's lost all sense of purpose and all sense of focus, and the Labour Party are representative of that.
This spring statement or emergency budget was delusional, complete make-believe figures. The Chancellor is not an economist, she's clueless, and therefore she's totally reliant on the Office for Budget Responsibility's numbers that I'm afraid are just woefully wrong. This year they've halved their growth forecast from what they said last October, from 2% to 1%. In reality, the economy is shrinking. It's already shrinking in January. And yet, magically, despite them saying that the world's changed, it's all very bad, they found a whole load of extra growth of almost 0.5% a year for subsequent years for the rest of Parliament. You can't have it both ways. Something is seriously wrong with these numbers. Here's the evidence. Already, we are borrowing 20 billion more this year than the OBR said just last October. and you can't keep borrowing more than you're spending. We're heading for serious financial trouble. We're heading towards recession, and things have got to change, and only reform knows what to do. We've got to scrap net stupid zero. We've got to dramatically cut huge amounts of wasteful spending and get people back to work. Way too many people have made the calculation that it's better to claim welfare, and the welfare budget is completely, utterly out of control. Work is a great thing. We've got to make work pay.
Do you agree with Liz Kendall that cutting welfare for people on incapacity benefit is a good way to get people to work?
You've got to cut welfare for people who shouldn't be claiming welfare because they've decided to sit at home on their backside as opposed to getting up and going out to work, which is what most of us do, and paying our taxes. It's too easy for too many people who are perfectly healthy not to go to work and to claim welfare. Of course, we want a world-leading benefit system that looks after the genuinely disabled who can't work. Many wonderful disabled people want to work and do work, and that's fantastic, and they should be supported. Look after the genuinely vulnerable and those who are genuinely looking for work. What you don't do is pay the idlers and the skivers to sit at home. That's how you save tens of billions a year.
I mean, PIP is a benefit that supports people who are disabled into work, and they're cutting it. So is that something that you would agree with?
What you're going to do is, as I said, those who are disabled, who genuinely cannot work, of course, we should be world leading at supporting those. You might want to increase those for whom payments for whom you're genuinely disabled. But there are way too many people who are claiming that they can't work because of things like mental health. Let me tell you the best cure for most mental health issues. Get busy, get to work, stop thinking about yourself. That's how you deal with mental health. Serious mental health is a very, very difficult illness. However, sadly, it is being hijacked by many people who just can't be bothered to get up in the morning and go to work. And it's only Reform UK that has the courage to tell the hard truths.
Finally, a lot of people will be feeling quite betrayed by this Labour budget. Do you think that we'll see a movement of people towards reform?
Well, already we've seen the reform support soar in the polls. We're the only party that will get to net zero immigration, that will stop the boats, that will get people back into work, will make work pay, we'll make risk-taking pay. We'll celebrate hard work. We'll celebrate people making money and contributing tax, and that's what we've got to do. And then we'll scrap net stupid zero that is destroying our economy, destroying jobs, destroying whole industries like steel, like automotive, like oil and gas, and like chemicals.
You mentioned their reform, and obviously, like you said, in Scotland, there is an alternative to the Labour Party. It is the SNP. But for working class people in England who feel betrayed by these Labour cuts, who should they turn to?
I mean, that's a big question, isn't it? I don't want to see them going that way. Nobody that I know wants to see them going that way either. But when you have the Tories who spent 14 years making their lives worse, making them poorer, and then you have a Labour government that comes in telling them that things are going to change, and nobody feels like anything's changed. All the promises that were made have been broken. So whether you are living with the 2-child cap impacting your life, whether you're a small business, whether you're a medium-sized business, whether you're a worker who's getting laid off because the business you work for is being clobbered by the national insurance increases, whether you're a pensioner who's had their winter fuel allowance taken, or a WASPy woman who was under the impression they were going to get compensation. So many broken promises, and then the Chancellor's response to that is to make things worse for people who are disabled. I mean, it's astonishing, and by any metric, it doesn't fit with Labour values, Labour principles. There's a few Labour politicians who've spoken up and spoken out, and credit to them. And my only hope is that they're successful in convincing the public that their course of action is the right one, the route forward they want is the right one, so that folk don't go off to the mad bunch in reform thinking that there's going to be some easy solutions to some tough problems, because that would be a bad thing for all of us.
I mean, I have to look at this from the point of view of people that we all represent, and in particular the vulnerable people who've had confirmation today that this Labour government is continuing or re-establishing conservative austerity, or hitting in the pockets some of the people who depend most on government for their support, taking away of safety nets. And we're very clear in Plaid Cymru that there are other options that UK government should be looking at, rather than balancing the books off the backs of the people who can least afford it.
Why do you think the Labour government have made that option to hit the most vulnerable rather than go after, like you said, wealthier people who could pay their fair share?
I wish I could answer that question. I was checking this morning, and exactly 10 months ago, in the heat of the general election campaign last year, Rachel Reeves was saying there will be no return to Conservative austerity, and people believed that Labour Party in opposition. And look at us now, a year on, we have a Labour Party that is perpetuating the pain that was felt under those years of austerity, and in particular the pain felt by people who've got least, to use the Rachel Reeves' terminology, who have least headroom to be able to take more cuts from UK government. It's just not right, and there are always other options for a government.
Obviously in Wales there is an alternative to Labour. You have Plaid Cymru. For working class people in England who maybe are feeling a bit betrayed by these cuts right now, who should they turn to?
You know what? It's true that in Wales more and more people are turning to Plaid Cymru. We share many of the values that Labour used to stand for, and I think many people can see that, and that's why we had recent polls showing that Plaid Cymru were in the lead. Possibly being able to lead Welsh government, taking that First Minister role away from Labour for the first time in the history of devolution. I get it in England that they might not have that Plaid Cymru alternative, and that's why surely Labour should be listening to the people who have been faithful to it over the years, and recognising that it has to reflect in its actions in government the values that it's meant to stand for, because it currently certainly isn't.
Can I ask, are you afraid of the kind of momentum that reform are gaining, not just in England but also in Wales?
We should all globally be very, very concerned about how politics is being changed by essentially that shift to the intolerant right of politics. We see it in Trump, we see it in across European politics. Globally it's happening, and we're no different here in the UK. I'm not saying that everybody who is being attracted by reform, or who's thinking about it, is part of the intolerant right. What I'm saying is that that's the offer that they are being asked to support. There is an alternative. There's an alternative in Wales. Come and vote for Plaid Cymru as somebody who can get rid of Labour from running Welsh government and stand against that kind of politics. There's no vision there. There's no plan by reform. It's just, if you're angry, vote for us. In England, surely Labour should be as concerned as I am about the growth of that kind of politics. And a statement like this today doesn't help, does it?